My husband's funeral was on a Tuesday. I remember because my sister said it was bad luck to bury someone on a Tuesday, and I told her that luck had already run out for our family the moment the police knocked on my door. That was 8 months ago. I thought the hardest part was behind me. I was wrong. My name is Margaret, and I am 67 years old. I spent 41 years married to a man named Gerald, 41 years of early mornings and late dinners, of raising 2 children in a house with a leaky roof we kept meaning to fix, of disagreements about money and vacations and whether the dog should sleep inside. 41 years of ordinary life, which I now understand is the most precious kind. Gerald was a contractor. He built things for other people, decks, additions, the occasional full home, and he was proud of that work. In the quiet way men of his generation carried pride, not spoken aloud, but visible in how he walked through a finished project, running his hand along a wall he had framed himself. He was not a perfect man. He drank too much in his 40s, and we nearly lost each other over it. He could be stubborn in ways that made me want to walk out the door and not come back. But he was mine, and I was his, and we had built something together that I believed in. When he died, or when I was told he died, it was a car accident on Route 9, 3 miles from our home. A wet road, a guardrail, a drop into a ravine. The rescue team said he likely died on impact. There was a funeral. There was a coffin. There was a burial plot in Riverside Cemetery next to his mother, which is what he had always wanted. I stood at that grave and I said goodbye. 8 months later, I was sitting in the 3rd row of my nephew's wedding reception, watching a slideshow that the videographer had put together when I saw my dead husband walk through a door in the background of a clip shot at the venue's outdoor bar. I did not scream. I did not faint. I simply stopped breathing for what felt like a full minute, staring at the projection screen while the song played and the other guests laughed at a photo of my nephew at age 7. Gerald was wearing a blue shirt I did not recognize. He was smiling at someone off camera. And then he was gone, disappeared back through the door, and the clip moved on to the next one. I excused myself from the table and walked to the bathroom and sat on the closed lid of the toilet for a long time. If my husband was dead, then who had just walked through that door? The wedding was in Asheville, North Carolina. We had driven up from our hometown in South Carolina, my daughter and her husband, and their 2 kids, and me in the back seat, trying to look like I was not unraveling. My nephew, my sister Diane's son, had gotten married to a wonderful woman named Claire, and the venue was a restored farmhouse about 20 minutes outside of Asheville with string lights and a wooden dance floor and the kind of beauty that makes you feel grateful to be alive. I had been looking forward to it. The first big family event since Gerald's passing. The first time I would have to smile for photographs without him beside me. I had been doing all right. That is what I told myself. All right. Not good, but all right. I was sleeping. I was eating. I had gone back to my Tuesday morning quilting group at the community center, and the women there were kind to me in the way that only women who have also lost someone can be. All right. And then the slideshow. I did not say anything to my daughter that night. I sat back down at the table and I watched the rest of the reception, and I danced once with my grandson, and I hugged Claire and told her she was beautiful, which she was. I did what you do. I functioned. But on the drive home the next morning, I could not stop seeing it. The blue shirt. The smile. The way he moved. That particular way Gerald had, of moving through a room like he was always slightly in a hurry, even when he was not. I needed to see that video again. I called the videographer 3 days after the wedding. I told him I was the aunt of the groom and that I had loved the slideshow, and asked if he might send me the full footage, or at least the portion shot at the outdoor bar. He was a young man, very friendly, and he said, of course, he would send me a link to the digital gallery. I watched the clip 11 times. It was Gerald. I am a 67-year-old woman who has looked at the same face across a dinner table for 4 decades. I know that face. I know the way his left shoulder rides slightly higher than his right. I know the particular angle of his chin when he is listening to someone. I know him. The clip was 4 seconds long. He walked in from the left side of the frame, paused, smiled at something to his right, and then moved out of frame on the right side. 4 seconds. But it was enough. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after watching it for the 11th time, and I thought about what it meant. There were only 2 possibilities. Either I was losing my mind, grief does strange things. I knew that. I had read about it, the way the brain manufactures what the heart cannot release, or my husband was alive. I thought about the closed coffin. The funeral home had told us it was necessary because of the nature of the accident, the injuries. We had been given no choice. I had accepted that, because what else do you do? What else do you accept? When you are handed a form to sign and told that this is what needs to happen. I thought about Gerald's business partner, a man named Roy, who had called me 3 weeks after the funeral and offered to buy out Gerald's share of the contracting company at a price I now realized was remarkably low, and who had seemed nervous in a way I had put down to grief, but now remembered differently. I thought about the fact that Gerald had taken out a significant amount of cash from our joint account in the 2 months before the accident. I had noticed it at the time. He told me it was for materials for a project. I believed him. I opened my laptop and I looked at the digital gallery again. Then I looked at the venue's website. The outdoor bar was a space they rented out separately for private events. That night, the night of my nephew's wedding, there had been a 40th birthday party happening at the same venue. I called the venue. I told the woman who answered that I believed I had seen an old friend in some photos from a recent event, and I was trying to track him down. I gave Gerald's description. She was not supposed to give me information, and she told me so. But she was also a warm person who felt uncomfortable saying no, and so she told me, in a roundabout way, that the birthday party had been for a man named Gerald and that it had been booked by someone named Patricia Weston. I wrote that name down. Patricia Weston. I said thank you. And I hung up the phone and I sat very still. Then I called my son. My son's name is David. He is 40 years old. He lives in Charlotte, about 2 hours from me, and works in commercial insurance. He is steady in the way that some people are just born steady, and whenever something in my life has gone sideways, I have called David first, before my daughter, before my sister, because he does not panic and he does not tell me what I want to hear. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "David, I need to tell you something and I need you to listen to all of it before you say anything." He said, "Mom, what happened?" I told him everything. The clip, the videographer, the venue, the name. There was a long silence. "Mom," he said carefully, "grief can sometimes—" "David, okay, watch the clip." I sent it to him while we were on the phone. I heard him watching it. I heard him watch it again. "Mom," he said, and his voice was different now, quieter. "I'm coming down this weekend. I need you to come sooner than that." He came the next day. We did not go to the police immediately. David said we needed more before we did that. Something concrete. And I understood what he meant, even though part of me wanted to walk into the sheriff's office that same afternoon. Instead, we looked up Patricia Weston. She was not hard to find. Social media is a remarkable thing. She had a public profile on Facebook, a woman in her late 40s, dark-haired, attractive, with a profile that was mostly photos of a small terrier and inspirational quotes, and, scrolling back about a year and a half, several photos tagged at locations in the Asheville area, and in one photo, posted 14 months ago, at a vineyard outside of Asheville, standing next to Patricia Weston with his arm around her shoulders, was my husband. The caption said, "Saturday with my favorite person." David looked at the screen and then he looked at me and he did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I had known. From the moment I saw the clip at the wedding, I had known, on some level, that this was what I would find. But knowing something is coming does not prepare you for the moment it arrives. I pressed my hands flat on the table and I breathed. "He's been up there," I said. "The whole time. It looks that way." "Someone died in that car," I said. "Someone was in that accident." David nodded slowly. "That's what we need to find out." What we found out over the following 2 weeks, with the help of a private investigator David hired out of Charlotte, was this. Gerald had been planning it for at least 2 years. The cash withdrawals were part of it, money, moved carefully, in amounts small enough not to trigger anything, into an account none of us knew existed. He had met Patricia Weston at a trade conference in Raleigh 3 years before the accident. She had moved to Asheville. He had been making trips up there that I had believed were work-related, and which his business partner, Roy, had covered for. The accident itself was real. A car had gone off Route 9 and into the ravine, but the car had belonged to a man named Curtis Boyle, a transient with no living relatives, whose body had been misidentified in the chaos of the recovery. Whether Gerald had engineered that misidentification deliberately, or had simply seized an opportunity when it presented itself, the investigator could not yet say. That, he told us, was a matter for law enforcement. Roy had known. Roy had accepted a buyout arrangement in which Gerald would eventually receive a percentage of the business's future profits, paid to a shell account. That was why Roy had come to me with that low offer so quickly. He was not being kind. He was executing a plan. I thought about Roy at the funeral, standing with the other men from the contracting community, his hat in his hands, telling me that Gerald had been the best man he had ever known. I thought about what I wanted to do to Roy. But there was something else. Something the investigator told us on a Tuesday evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a folder of documents, that I had not been prepared for. My daughter had known. Not from the beginning. From about 4 months after the funeral, when Gerald had contacted her, reached out carefully, indirectly, through a message that could have been explained away, and told her he was alive and asked her to keep his secret. He had given her money, a significant amount, deposited into an account in her name at a bank she had opened separately from her husband. Her name was Susan. She was 38 years old. She had sat beside me at the graveside and held my hand. When the investigator showed me the bank records, I excused myself and went to the bathroom, and I stood over the sink, and I looked at my own face in the mirror for a long time. Then I went back to the table and I said, "What do we do next?" We went to the police on a Thursday. I want to be clear about something. I did not go to the police because I was angry, though I was. I did not go because I wanted revenge, though there was a part of me that did. I went because a man was buried in my husband's grave under my husband's name, and that man had a story, and whatever had happened to him deserved the truth. That is what I kept coming back to. Curtis Boyle, whoever he was, wherever he had come from, he deserved better than to lie in the wrong ground with the wrong name above him. The detective who took our case was a woman named Harris, calm and precise, who listened to everything I said and asked clean questions, and did not seem surprised by any of it, in a way that I found both reassuring and disturbing. They brought Gerald in for questioning within a week. He had been living in Asheville with Patricia Weston as Gerald West, a small change, a new last name, a new driver's license, a whole borrowed life. The house they shared had a front porch with a wind chime. I know because the investigator had sent me photographs, and I had looked at them more than was good for me. When they arrested him, Patricia Weston apparently stood on that porch and watched them put him in the car and did not say a word. I was not there for it. David asked if I wanted to be, and I said no. What I wanted was to call my daughter. That conversation happened on a Sunday afternoon. I drove to Susan's house, the house where my grandchildren lived, the house where I had spent Christmases and Easters and ordinary weekends, and I sat across from her at her kitchen table while her husband took the children to the park. She cried before I said anything. She must have known by then that it was over. I let her cry. I sat there and I watched her and I waited. And when she was quiet, I said, "Tell me why." She said he had told her it was complicated, that he had gotten into something he couldn't get out of, that the fake death was the only way, that he had wanted to protect me from the truth about the debts, the affair, all of it, and that staying dead was his way of protecting me. I said, "He told you that, and you believed it." She didn't answer. I said, "Susan, he used you. He gave you money to buy your silence, and you let him. And while you were keeping his secret, I was sleeping alone in a house and mourning a man who was up in Asheville, watching my nephew's wedding reception in a blue shirt." She said, "Mom, I was afraid. If I told you, I would have known the truth." I said, "That is what you took from me, the truth." I left her house. I drove home. I sat in my driveway for a while before I could go inside. The legal process took months. Gerald was charged with fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and several other things I let the attorney explain to me in terms I could follow. Roy faced charges as well. The matter of Curtis Boyle, how his body had come to be in that car, and how much Gerald had known, was under separate investigation, and I was told it might be some time before those answers came. There was also the matter of our assets. Gerald had hidden more than I had realized. The attorney who helped me was sharp and thorough and treated me like a person capable of understanding my own situation, which I appreciated more than I could say. We recovered most of it. Not all, but most. Susan and I did not speak for 5 months. It was the longest 5 months of my life. Longer in some ways than the 8 months I had spent grieving a man who was not dead. Because grief for the dead has a shape to it, a known path, a language that other people understand. Grief for a betrayal is different. It sits in you differently. It does not diminish in the ways that loss diminishes. It just changes form. She called me in February. She said she was in therapy. She said her therapist had told her she needed to stop waiting for me to reach out and do it herself, and that she agreed. She said she was sorry, not in the way people say sorry when they want to be forgiven quickly, but in the way that sounds like someone who has been sitting with something heavy for a long time and is finally putting it down. I did not forgive her that day. I told her I heard her, and I told her I was glad she called, and I told her we would need time. That was the most honest thing I could say. I want to tell you what I know now that I did not know before. I know that I survived 41 years of a marriage to someone who was capable of more deception than I had imagined, and that surviving it did not break me, though it came close. I know that the women in my Tuesday quilting group, when I finally told them the truth, did not look at me with pity. They looked at me with recognition, and that recognition was one of the most sustaining things I have ever experienced. I know that my son David is the person I thought he was. That matters. When the ground shifts under everything you thought you knew, finding out that someone is exactly who you believed them to be, that is not a small thing. I know that I have started doing things I had let go of during the marriage. I paint, badly and joyfully, on Saturday mornings. I have taken a trip to New Mexico with my sister Diane that I had been talking about for 15 years. I eat dinner when I want to, and I sleep with the window open, and I have a standing Thursday dinner with a neighbor named Ruth, who makes me laugh harder than I have laughed in years. I know that I think about Curtis Boyle sometimes. I made a donation in his name to a nonprofit that serves people without homes, which felt small but was what I had to give. The investigation into what happened to him is still ongoing. I check the updates when they come, and I know this. If you are sitting somewhere right now, watching the slideshow at someone else's celebration, and something in the corner of a frame stops your heart. Trust what you see. Trust yourself. You are not losing your mind. You are simply the first one in the room to understand what has always been true. I am Margaret. I am 67 years old, and I am still here.